heat for this because, look, I wrote a book called What Every Christian Needs to Know About the Quran. And I think if a person honestly looks at what I said, I honestly dealt with the background. I gave the hadith, I gave all that information. But I did so in such a way of demonstrating that I'm not starting there. I'm not making this a primary argument. This is an issue. We're going to have a disagreement as to exactly how this all works out, what's happened historically since then, all the rest of that stuff. But if I just start in throwing verbal bombs, knowing that what it's going to do is it's immediately going to push you away. I am basically saying to you, I only want to argue with you. I don't actually want to communicate with you. And I don't want to hear back from you while you actually believe what you believe. I'm not going to open my heart to you in love and mercy. And from a Christian perspective, this is completely opposite to what we are professing we actually want to do in reaching out to the Muslim people.
One of the reasons why we structured this topic is that to inform the Duat and the Evangelists that don't go the mudslinging route.
Right.
Because if you're going to start speaking about Aisha or something which are sensitive to Muslim feelings, no, the Muslims who are in apologetics or the Muslims in Dawah, they're going to mudsling a ton of things of the Bible to you. And they're going to come and say a whole lot of horrible things about David and Saul and about Lord. They have the ammunition as well, what to tell you. And what does it benefit anybody? Absolutely nothing. Now, instead of arguing in fruitless things, what is the Muslim way of engagement? This is the highlight which I like to express to all the Muslim Duat as well as the evangelists. Preach the way Jesus preached, and preach the way Muhammad preached. And none of them went the route of insults. They all showed the goodness of their faith and the beauty of their faith. And I think it's time, Dr. White, what's going on in the apologetics world, that people like myself and yourself need to address our own people, that all du'at that are there, do the right thing, do the dignified manner. And if you have to come across missionaries which are the bazaar type, then tell them peace. As the Quran says, وَإِذَا مَرُّوا بِاللَّغْوِ مَرُّوا كِرَامًا, that when you pass a instance of something which you do not like, move away with dignity and honor. And if you have to engage somebody who is ignorant, then just say peace and carry on. Why go the route where you're just going to add more, throw basically what we say in South Africa, put more charcoal or put more petrol to the fire?
Ahmed, you would kill Facebook if they actually Facebook would cease to exist. Would it not if people didn't have those types of arguments? No, but you're exactly right, and that is the hard part. Many of us feel, look, many of those engaged in dawah, many of those engaged in apologetics, immaturely adopt the attitude that if someone challenges you at any instance in any way, you've got to go toe-to-toe with them. And real maturity from a Christian perspective is to know when. There is a time to build up, there is a time to tear down. There is wisdom in recognizing that given the weightiness of the topics that we're discussing, not every situation is a good time for discussing these things. And look, what I have discovered and what's opening doors to a conversation like this is that if I can get to know who I'm going to be dialoguing with or even debating with, even having to say, you know, if you and I were to debate, well, a topic like the crucifixion of Jesus, I'm going to have to say in that debate, I believe you are completely wrong. But if you and I have got to know each other first, if you know I care for you, if you know that I'm praying for you, if you know that I would never seek your personal harm and that my ultimate goal is that I want to see the best for you, and for a Christian, you know what that means. If you know that, then we can have that debate and we can disagree strongly, but then shake hands at the end and then continue to pray for one another. And what I've discovered, what I am discovering, is that the audience can sense that. They can sense the sense of respect that exists between those two people. And what I want to see at the end of my debates is I don't want, because I've seen this happen before, is at the end of the debate, you've got the Christians over here doing their thing together, and the Muslims over here doing their thing together. What I like to see is because they've seen the conversation start with respect up front, then afterwards the conversation continues between the Christians and the Muslims the way it should be done afterwards. That's my goal. That's what I would like to see happening. I think you've got to admit That's not the normative thing that happens, unfortunately. I just don't think that our communities are having the conversations we need to have about the important issues. Yeah, we'll talk about some things over and over and over again, and I know they need to be discussed, but I really want to see the conversation move forward into greater areas that require more self-control on the part of the people making the presentations, yeah, but that's what needs to happen, because most of my people do not know why you believe what you believe. And that's vice versa, that goes to both sides.
I think we need to go back to history and see and understand the beautiful relationship between the Muslim world and the Christian world. I have to go back to the story of Umar, the Khalifa of Islam, the second Caliph, and the Patriarch Sempronius, who was the bishop of the Holy Sepulchre in Jerusalem. Now this history is very important because our history goes back thousands of years. What happens here is that the Caliph Umar went to Jerusalem and was given the keys of the Holy Sepulchre by the Patriarch. And it so happened that it was prayer time. And the priest told Umar, that is prayer time, why don't you pray in our church? Umar was wise. He refused to pray in the church and prayed outside. And his reason, his diplomacy, his ethics, his morals was, if I had to pray in the Holy Sepulchre, that's what you said, Sepulchre, then the Muslims would claim this is part of this is a holy site for them and turn it into a mosque. So it so happened that Umar prayed outside, and at the place that he prayed, that became a mosque. So Umar radiallahu anhu had the wisdom to not to respect the sepulchre, and the story will go further after I hear your response on that. I'm sure you heard about this famous story about Umar and
Just briefly, it's not one of the major stories that's shared, but yes, I've heard something about
But
it.
you see, the wisdom of this story is that Umar did not take over the church, and this was in his hands. And going through history, this is a very, very important point which we could show how our faiths have existed for over 1,000 years and still exist. The keys of the Holy Sepulchre are given to two families. One family is called Juwaida, the second family is called Nusayba. That was given from the time of Umar and reinforced in 1187 by Salahuddin. And to this date, these two Muslim families have the honor and privilege of guarding, opening the doors at 4 o'clock in the morning and closing the doors of the Holy Sepulchre. So it's over 1,500 years that they have been granted this privilege. And the same Muslims also have the keys of the other mosques and other churches. So this is tolerance. That it hasn't been that, okay, King Faisal had passed the issue that this Easter we're going to close the Holy Sepulchre. And it's not a matter of control, it's a matter of privilege and respect. And if these two nations could live in harmony for thousands of years with regards to a key, I don't know why can't the rest of the world live in harmony?
That's the goal, but we recognize in many places from both sides that there are people on both sides that don't live up to that goal,
Yes.
which is leading to a tremendous amount of friction and even violence today,
Yes.
and it's a shame. But when we live in lands where we have the freedom to interact with one another, it just seems to me, and what I'm calling my community to, is loving the Muslim people by praying for them, seeking their benefit, and I warn my Christian people against having fear. Because if I fear you, I'm not going to open my heart to you. I'm not going to really express to you my true desires for you. I'm not going to do what's best for you. I may in a very formal way, sort of tell you the truth about keeping you at arm's length. That's not the Christian way of demonstrating the life of Christ. And I just sense a tremendous amount of fear, especially amongst Bible-believing conservative Christians, because the source of information they're being given only tells them one aspect, the worst aspect of Islam, and they don't believe that someone like yourself actually could be out there and actually exist, and hence they're not going to extend themselves to you. This is sort of the big issues between our two communities, but we're talking especially about those who engage in dialogue and debate, and we have to try to set a standard for people who are looking to us. And look, from the very first debate that I did with Sheikh Shabir Ali in 2006, no one told me to do it, but I just gave him some things during the course of toward the end of the debate, because he was coming into it, he was pretty much alone. If there were 10 Muslims in the audience, I'd be a little, out of 2,500, 3,000 people, I'd be a little surprised. Yeah, I've been in that situation. I've been in a few mosques myself, so I understand when you're in the small minority, but I wanted to show my respect for him, even though we had just had a very firm disagreement over a particular topic. And I just think, in my experience, when I get to know the person, when there is an understanding on the part of the audience that we respect each other, it raises the caliber of the debate. So much of the stuff that gets in the way of the topic is set aside. There are times on both of our sides when, if you feel the other side is being very aggressive, you're going to be looking for opportunities of gotcha. And that doesn't necessarily make for the best debate in the sense of a focus upon the actual subject. And so I really think that it's just necessary for Christians to engage in this activity in a way that honors our confession, that if we believe that Jesus Christ is the way, the truth, and the life, then we have to be truthful in everything that we do. And that means, and I've been committed to this, people will tell you that I've been criticized from the beginning, I will not use argumentation against any religious faith outside of my own that, if it was turned around, would refute my own perspectives. Equal scales is something I've called for in many of my debates with my Muslim friends. And that, to me, is one of the ways that I show respect for my God, for the gospel, and for the other side. I think it's extremely important, and I do think that there are arguments that are used on both sides that I think need to be laid aside because they are not simply truthful, they're not consistent. And I think it would just help to raise the level of the dialogue, which we really. Someone said at that debate, the moderator or the guy who introduced the debate, he said, if you do not allow two groups of people who disagree to argue, all they have left is to fight. And I think he was right about that. And so if we can argue in beautiful words, argue graciously and mercifully from a biblical perspective, that shows tremendous respect for each other and for our God.
I think you summed it up beautifully again. And remember, the Prophet Muhammad has taught us, وَلَا تَتَمَنَّوْا لِقَاءَ الْعَدُوِّ, that do not desire or wish to meet your enemy in battle. No, don't. It's a prophetic tradition that don't hope or don't have it in your heart to meet an enemy. Rather, live in peace. Now, we don't want to get into that subject, but in the apologetics field, over my years in discussion with non-Muslims, atheists, Christians, Hindus, etc., I've seen you get basically the good, you get the bad, and you get the ugly, and even people on both sides. And I think in order for the general Muslim public to prosper, as well as the general Christian public to prosper, is to keep integrity, have education, mix with each other. Sometimes people will go to a Muslim land for vacation expecting horror stories, but when they're on vacation in a Muslim land, they find the normal people. The people go to work, earn, pay the taxes, pay the charities, help each other, and they're just normal people. So at the end of the day, we're just normal people with different theologies. We do not have to agree to the way of salvation, or our methodology could be worlds apart. But it does not mean that we should not respect each other and sit down with each other and have love and tolerance and social coercion with each other. And the problems we're finding in our country, South Africa, is that during the last few years, for example, in certain areas, there's been objections by evangelists or of the Christian church to put up a masjid, a mosque in a certain area. These people are unaware of it. They think, okay, now ISIS is coming to town, or we're having Boko Haram coming to town. But the normal, everyday Muslims who want to have a place of prayer. And it's ironic, our friend Pastor Boshoff, when this incident happened in our country, I phoned him up. I said, Pastor, we've got a problem. The community, the Christian community, is not giving us permission to put a masjid in the suburb. What should we do? So he gave me a beautiful answer. He told me, should we inform the Christian public that we're going to have a nightclub or a casino or a den of vice in your suburb, or place of worship? So I think that's the attitude we should have with each other. I don't know, what do you feel on that?
Well, right now in the United States, there's obviously a tremendous discussion on this subject. I recently had a dialogue with Dr. Yasser Qadi, and this came up in that same context, because many Muslims in my country really do feel like there is, in the future, the possibility that they are going to be restricted in their rights to be able to worship and things like that. And if you've watched The Dividing Line, my webcast, I have said to people over and over again, don't you understand? Just on a completely selfish level, any power you grant to the government against the Muslims is eventually going to be used against you. It is absolute foolishness. So even just on that level, but the other thing to consider is, look, if we want to talk about religious liberty, then you need to be, again, consistent in how you make that application. From our perspective, you see, using government to try to suppress your right to build a masjid or whatever else is foolishness. Our desire is to be able to present the powerful gospel of Jesus Christ to all people, including the Muslims. The only power, as a Christian, the only power that's been given to the church is the Word of God and the gospel, made alive by the Spirit of God. That's it. And I can have absolute confidence in that. And so to try to go outside of that, to try to use governmental influence, means I don't really actually trust that this is enough. And that's a true issue. And that is actually one of the areas of theological difference between us, because we have a different view. We would say that man's created in the image of God. You would say fitra, that man's born upon fitra. So because of the mithaq, the covenant that was taken from Adam, it ends up bringing us to similar places by different routes. It does have some differences to it, but you see, we have this belief that man is fallen in Adam, which you do not believe in the same way that we do. There is a relationship, but it's not the same effect that we would believe. And so, from our perspective, it's only the gospel that can possibly change hearts and minds. That is one difference between an evangelist, an apologist, and doing dawah. I have to be dependent spiritually upon the Spirit of God to operate in the person to whom I'm speaking. It's not up to me to try to convince you. And that's why I have to be consistent in the arguments I'm using. Because if I try to change my arguments to sort of try to manipulate you to do what I want you to do, I'm showing no confidence in my actual theology.
So at the end of the day, James, you do what you do for the rewards, for the rewards that you might receive from your God, etc. And a Muslim would do the same thing. At the end of the day, there's a fine line between want to convert a person and just deliver a message. Now, for example, when you come to the Holy Spirit, I've seen it a few times speaking to the Mormons as well as the Jehovah's Witness. The moment the argument gets a bit heated up, or if I put them in a spot, or put them in a bit of a tangle, they're going to say, okay, the Holy Spirit is no more here, so they have to end the argument and move along, and rapidly return. Like, I've got tons of Jehovah's Witnesses on my phone, like inviting them, please come back, but they never return because they feel no, the argument got too heated up, or I put them in a spot, or it didn't go smoothly according to them, so basically they ran away. Now, I know you're not going to do that.
Right.
You're not going to do that. You will sit and argue and speak it out, and we will be able to go further. Now, keeping all this in mind, I'd just like to ask you before we end on Dr. James, what would be your advice to the true evangelist and the true Duat who want to interact with each other and share their views and not necessarily convert them, but give them a choice to understand what they're saying from each other's source and have respect and love between each other? How would you address that?
Well, first of all, to the Christian, if you do not have a passionate love for the individual to whom you're proclaiming the gospel, I just simply call you to repent. Because if you do not have love, then you are not going to adorn the gospel of Jesus Christ properly. That's the first thing. Our hearts has to be. If you're a redeemed individual yourself, then you must speak from that position of absolute grace. It's just necessary. Secondly, know what you're talking about. Don't just go with internet apologetics. Make sure that the information that you have obtained is actually accurate. And then you have to speak to the person. There are differences between Muslim people. You can't just simply assume things. You have to find out from them what their faith is all about. And to my Muslim friends, please, just as there's bad information about Islam on the web, there's bad information about Christianity on the web. to. And so please be careful in the information that you're using. Find out where that